Welcome back to another episode of the Science of Winning podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about the critical evolution of the Chief People Officer role, or you can call it the VP of HR, whatever the title is for the role within your organization. But I'm going to talk about how that needs to evolve and how that needs to evolve quick. And before I do, I just want to share an analogy. Similar to the Chief People Officer role, there was a role that had to evolve over the years, and that is the role of the CFO. The CFO, a number of decades ago, that role was responsible for the numbers, you can say. The income statement, the balance sheet, right? To make sure expenses were in line, that the profit was there, to make sure that shareholders were paid effectively or were happy, and that the taxes were all paid. But that role evolved significantly over the years to the role that it is today, which is a strategic partner in creating the strategy for the organization. So the role evolved from number crunching to developing strategy and being very strategic. So if your CFO today doesn't have a strong expertise or competency in strategy, then you need to bring in a CFO that does, because it's absolutely critical. The other role that has to evolve is the Chief Human Resources Officer. It has to evolve quick. And the evolution of this role has shifted over the years. It has gone from, you can say, being in charge of compensation, benefits, employment law, to a role about culture. Okay, so the main conversation or the main focus that the Chief People Officer role has right now, and I'm going to say this anecdotally, is that they focus on culture. Okay, how people think and behave. Let's just say that is the overall definition of culture. And a lot of people have been throwing around this saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast without actually understanding the origins of that saying. Okay, that saying has just been morphed from its original version, which is culture constrains strategy. The meaning behind that is just simply, you can have a great strategy, but if your culture is not very effective, then it's going to constrain or restrict that strategy. Even if you have an amazing strategy, and if you have a poor culture, you're not going to be able to execute on that strategy very effectively. However, strategy is still very critical, and I still believe that it is even more important than culture, because you can have a great culture, but a poor strategy, and that's going to lead you right in the pits. Okay. Ideally, you want a great strategy and a great culture, but there is a difference between culture and human performance and potential. And this is the important shift that the HR role needs to make over the next 5 to 10 years, particularly with AI coming into the workforce and changing how businesses are operating. Okay, so it is changing the game dramatically, where knowledge and intelligence isn't the competitive advantage anymore. What is the competitive advantage is your workforce tapping into their optimal level of performance and potential, which means that if you give two people the exact same technology, which is going to happen here, it's already happening. What happens is a person that is able to perform at a higher level, okay, and reach their highest level of potential is going to be outshining the other person. And if you times that by however many people you have within your organization, that's your competitive advantage going forward. Okay. What used to be a competitive advantage was people's knowledge and intelligence. That's not the competitive advantage anymore. It's really around how people show up and how they optimize and maximize and tap into their potential. However, the challenge is that most conversations that HR leaders are having right now isn't about human performance and potential. It's more around culture. And culture conversations are more around engagement, retention, diversity, equity, all of this great stuff. Okay. But I'm going to be very direct here. A lot of it is also fluff. Okay. We are having a lot of fluff conversations and not having direct conversations about people performance and potential. And the more people have conversations about fluff, they're going to be left behind. We have to now move forward at a rapid pace to be able to remain competitive. And those conversations are around performance. And performance has a number of different variables. For example, do people have extreme clarity? Okay, so things like goal setting, effective goal setting. Where do they fall on the motivational scale? Or do they have the capacity? Do they have the competency? Do they have the character? All of these elements are core aspects of human performance and potential. And we have to make that next step of evolution from culture to performance now. And as I mentioned before, culture is very important. Culture is what we call the climate. If you go back to your days of biology, and you think of when you put that bacteria on the petri dish and you went to that petri dish a few days later to see if that bacteria actually grew or not. Sometimes that bacteria grew, sometimes that bacteria died, depending on what was on that petri dish. And that petri dish is what we call culture. Okay. It enables people to perform at a higher level, or it constrains them. But it's not the core thing that gets people to perform higher or gets people to reach their potential. Okay? It just enhances their ability and supports their ability. And so culture is roughly about 25 to 40% of the formula. The rest is really around human performance and potential, how they show up, how they tap into their own level of performance and potential. And that's a trainable skill. And as I've mentioned before, there's only a small percentage of society that has that trainable skill. Unless you're in elite sports, specialized military, world-class performing arts, most people are not tapping into or haven't learned how to tap into the highest level of performance and potential. So to sum it up, just like the CFO role had to evolve from crunching numbers to being more about strategy, the HR leader role now has to shift. It's shifted partly from employment law, compensation and benefits to culture, but that big shift, the most important shift going forward, is going to be from culture to human performance and potential.